Baseball is back.
Perdomo makes the play.
And a high fly ball. No doubt about this. Home run Marte.
They're going to send them all the way around. Corbin Carroll with an inside the park answer back.
I'm Ivan Melendez.
I'm Luis Gonzalez.
I'm Tori Lavello, and you're listening to the T-Backs Podcast.
T-Backs Podcast.
T-Backs Podcast.
Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the T-Backs Podcast, Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. Today, we are talking trades. We're talking about what has been labeled the worst kept secret of the MLB winter meetings. And no, that secret is not that Jordan Montgomery is terrible, but we will be talking about him later. We're talking, of course, about the Chicago Cubs and that they are aggressively shopping him to, as far as it sounds from Ken Rosenthal, anyone who will take him. And you know, we just had to get an expert in to talk all things Cubs. It's at CrawlysCubs, making their T-Backs podcast debut. Crawly, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
So, first question right off the beat. Cody Bellinger, you know, is a big name in baseball. Why are the Cubs getting rid of them?
So, when the Cubs were signed Cody Bellinger, it was kind of like a scratch-off lotto ticket. You know, he was Rookie of the Year, he was MVP, and then he was hurt a whole bunch, and the Dodgers didn't want him anymore. Cubs picked him up and signed him to a one-year contract, right? And so you had nothing to lose. And in 2023, he was phenomenal. He really was the best hitter on the Cubs team, arguably the best player on the team in 2023. And everybody knew Cody was going to take that contract and parlay it into something bigger. And him and his agent, Scott Boras, and obviously, you know, when you talk about Scott Boras, he was looking for an astronomical sum of money, something in the range, you know, there was rumors $250 million for Cody Bellinger. Well, Cody Bellinger had one good year. You're not going to give 6-7 years, $250 million for Cody one good year of Cody Bellinger, you know, based off of that. So I think he way overshot the market. And if you remember in the 23-24 offseason, a lot of Boras's guys signed very, very late, Cody Bellinger being one of them. And so the Cubs decided, you know, he was very popular among the clubhouse, among his teammates. We have something called Cubs Convention every year in January in the offseason to get everybody kind of hyped up for the season. And Dansby Swanson, who's, you know, our highest paid player, said, look, we need Cody back. Everyone was freaking out. We need Cody. And Jed Hoyer kind of took his time, waited a little bit and said, okay, I'm going to offer this deal right when spring training was started. And it was a 3-year, $60 million deal roughly, but it had opt-outs after the first year and after the second year. So in Jed's mind, okay, Cody Bellinger, we're going to have you have one more good year. And then, you know, it was a prove-it contract. So you were hoping that he would have a really good year and then Cody would opt out and then the Cubs that would be, you know, $50 million off the books that you wouldn't have to worry about with Cody Bellinger. The Cubs have a very young, exciting center fielder in Pete Crow-Armstrong. They got him in the Javi Baez trade. And so Pete Crow-Armstrong, he made his debut at the end of the 2023 season, didn't get a lot of playing time. But last year, you know, he struggled the first couple of months, but then it kind of clicked. Electric outfielder, probably one of the best gloves I've ever seen in center fielder patrolling for the Cubs. Absolutely fast. He only got caught stealing, in my opinion, only one time. There was another time where it looked like there was maybe a missed hit and run, something. He was leaning off a third and he was already kind of, you know, assuming that the contact would be made. But really, out of one straight steal, I only saw him got caught once. So the hope was you had Cody Bellinger, you know, maybe for 1 year to kind of work as this transition to Pete Crow-Armstrong. Cody would have a good year. You could either traded him in 2024 if he was having a good year and the team wasn't doing well, or he would opt out after that first year and then get that big contract that him and Scott Boras were looking for. As it happens, 2024 was not really the greatest season for Cody. He didn't have the season that both he, the Cubs and Scott Boras would hope he would have had.
Yeah, like I've got his numbers here on 2024. It's a 266 average, 18 home runs, 78 RBI, and 137 hits, all of which are down on 2023. So, for that kind of money, clearly you're looking to offload that. And I think it's a very similar deal with what's going on with the Diamondbacks at the moment, having brought in Jordan Montgomery very, very late in the middle of spring training last year. He was a guy who we've spent a very similar amount of money on a year-on-year contract. Like Bellinger's making, I think it's 27 or so before options. Montgomery's making 22. And, these are guys that both teams have got to get off of the books. So a lot of fans are saying, we want to just do a straight swap. Is that going to be something that can happen? And, as a Diamondbacks fan, I think a lot of guys will celebrate if somebody takes Montgomery and we don't have to pay too much out of that contract. That's a straight win. Otherwise, we're going to be saddled with another Madsen Bumgarner situation where he's still making money off of us this year, which is crazy. He hasn't pitched for 2 years now. But
Dodgers aren't the only one giving deferred contracts, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're deferring money for, a guy who couldn't throw above 90 miles an hour by the time he was done with us, and Montgomery's in the same department there. What are the Cubs going to do with a pitcher who will throw a 94 mile an hour fastball? You think is a good environment to get the best out of him?
So I think, in all honesty, when you look at this, it's what all the beat writers here and the national reporters have been talking about. It's the worst kept secret in Chicago is that the Cubs want to get rid of Cody Bellinger. I don't see and so at that point, you have a couple options. Can the Cubs throw in some of their prospects? They have one of the top rated farm systems. The other thing is taking an offsetting contract, which is what you're talking about with Jordan Montgomery, $5 million between friends. What's that, right?
Yeah.
Between organizations. But it just, to me, doesn't seem like it would be a really good fit. I think what the Cubs are going to try to do is see who the losers are in the Juan Soto sweepstakes, right? So you got the New York teams both in there. You got Toronto, mentioned in there. And so a lot of those teams that are trying to get Juan Soto were teams that were mentioned for Cody Bellinger last offseason. And so the hope is for the Cubs, organization is that, let's take the Yankees, for example. Let's say Soto signs with the Mets. Well, then maybe the Yankees will take some of that contract. Cubs are going to have to pay some of that down. But if the Yankees are willing to go halfsies on that, then that kind of frees up a little bit more money for the Cubs. So I honestly, Jordan Montgomery, the Cubs had a really, really phenomenal season from Shota Imanaga. I don't think anybody really anticipated him. He got some Cy Young Award votes. He had he was part of the first Cubs home no-hitter since the early 1970s. He was a great player. Justin Steele is a guy that, he had some injuries last year, but he was our ace previous to that. He was all-star. Jamison Tyone had a really, really good year. And then the Cubs have a lot of young pitching that they're hoping that starts bubbling up here. So, taking on Jordan Montgomery really, we know that the Cubs do want to get a pitcher of some type, more of a frontline type pitcher. Walker Buehler's a name, Max Fried's a name. I don't think Max Fried is, going to cost more than Jed Hoyer's willing to stomach. But a guy like Walker Buehler or Jack Flaherty are both guys that I think really kind of fit Jed Hoyer's MO, which is not a lot of years, not a ton of money. You don't get saddled with a big pitching contract. He just doesn't like that much. Last one we had like that was John Lester, and that worked out well. But since they also had Yu Darvish, who they traded, they gave him, but that was when Theo Epstein was here. And since Theo's been gone, Jed has not given out any contracts like that. So I would say that, more than anything, I think that they really, the issue for the Cubs is hitting. Pitching, they were in the top 5 pretty much all season long. They don't have a problem with pitching. Their bullpen kind of sucks, so obviously that's areas where they can improve upon, and hopefully they're going to address that with free agent and some of the young pitchers that I talked about. They Ben Brown, they have Jordan Wicks. They have Caleb Killian, Javier Assad. They got a lot of young pitchers that could fill in those roles. I think more than anything, what this team lacked was offense, and they were in the bottom third of the league all the time. So starting pitching, you're never going to have too much starting pitching, right? I mean, that's always going to be something you want. But if you're talking about the biggest area of needs that the Cubs are looking for right now, it's definitely offense. They have like no pop. There's nobody when you go through the Cubs offense and you're kind of like looking through the list. There's no guy that you go, oh man, how are we going to get around that guy? Or don't let anybody on base ahead of that guy. We don't have that guy. Most of our guys, the best guys we have hit like 23, 24 home runs. There's no 30, 40 home run pop guy on there. And I don't think they're, I just don't know. That's the problem, where the power is going to come from. So they're looking for some type of power bat, but from all accounts, they're not going to spend that big money unless they offset Bellinger somehow.
Yes, and that brings us very neatly onto the next point of what Bellinger would do for the Diamondbacks, because as a lot of guys will know, our outfield is pretty stacked between Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Corbin Carroll, and then center field options you sort of swap between Jake McCarthy and Alec Thomas, both of whom are expected to have a bit more of a breakout year than they did last year. People are saying Bellinger is the Diamondbacks' solution to the first base problem as we lose Christian Walker to free agency. Do you think that would be an absolutely colossal waste were we to make him part of our first base platoon? Because we all know just how good some of his defense in the outfield can be.
No, actually, he was shockingly good at first base. So when Cody Bellinger came in 2023, he got injured. I want to say, the Cubs were struggling in 2023. He got injured in June. And first base has been a hole for the Cubs ever since Anthony Rizzo left. And so when he got injured in June of 2023, a guy named Mike Tauchman came up. And for whatever reason, Mike Tauchman all of a sudden caught fire. And so when Cody came back, they did play him at first base a lot because the Cubs really didn't have good first base options. And he is nearly as good at first base as he is in the outfield. And I think that is part of the value that Cody Bellinger brings. Not only is he a great clubhouse guy, like I said, his teammates advocated for him. They loved him. He can play center field. He can play any of the outfield spots. But again, he is really, really good at first base, surprisingly so. So I would say if he was to come on your team, you guys, I think he could be successful. I don't think it would be a colossal waste, for you to get him. I just don't know if the fit for the Cubs to get Jordan Montgomery is really there. But, part of the problem that the Cubs had last year offensively, Wrigley Field, I don't know if your listeners are very familiar with Wrigley Field. Everyone always thinks it's a hitter's ballpark, and that's not necessarily the case. The winds are always bizarre, and year to year, you cannot plan on what the winds are going to do.
Yeah, statistically, the number 2 pitchers park in MLB last year.
Correct. And nobody knew why that was. It was just bizarre. Sometimes the wind blows in, sometimes it's crosswinds. So everybody on the Cubs offensively had a down year. If you're telling me that Cody Bellinger is playing, in a stadium for, 81 games, maybe he'll do a lot better. I'm not sure if Cody's numbers at, Chase Field, but I would say more than anything, it was a weird year and the wind just was really goofy last year. And so if you're worried about him defensively at first baseman, don't. I mean, that's where he fit in really well for the Cubs.
Defense, though. Christian Walker, widely regarded the best defensive baseman in the MLB.
I mean, you're not going to replace him, but I would say it's not going to be this gaping. You're not going to sit there going, "Oh my God, this guy sucks. This is awful." Yeah, you're going to lose a little bit there, but I don't think it would be a tremendous amount, in my opinion.
All right.
You can trust me. I've seen a lot worse first basemen. He can play. He can glove it. He's got great hand-eye coordination. He picks the ball well. I would not. If you're telling me, is there any concern? I mean, you're not going to replace the best first baseman and not have a little bit of defensive fallout, but it's not going to be so great that it's going to cost you games in the long run. I don't.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that I've been talking to my friends and saying, right now our first base option is Pavin Smith, who is a right fielder. Why on earth aren't we excited about getting somebody who at least can play first base at a major league level? That it's better than what we have right now by an absolute long shot. So I see it as a positive if, he's a guy we can go out and get. He's, of course, an Arizona native as well. A lot of guys are having a lot of rose-tinted specs about who the Diamondbacks go out and get in this offseason. Paul Goldschmidt's another name that's saying, bring him back to the desert, and everyone's losing their minds over it. And who knows if that'll happen? It's looking a bit less likely than it did, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Everyone was talking about it, and that rumor's cooled off. But if we get into the cold, hard numbers game of this trade, Diamondbacks are going to be saving themselves not so much money, but it's about a $5 million difference in those contracts. But the interesting thing is Fangraphs has a projected 2.1 wins above replacement for Cody Bellinger in the next year versus Jordan Montgomery, who's at 0.9, which is, pretty shocking when you think about the money we've spent on him. He's a guy who's spent some time in the pen as well this year. So you said the Cubs are struggling a bit from the bullpen. Maybe he'd go and start a career as an elite closer there. Who knows? What's your pitching coaching like?
As far as the pitching coach, we have Tommy Hotovy, and he's a great guy. I think the Cubs can do, good pitching infrastructure, I think, that we have here. But, boy, I just think that, when you talk about an elite closer, maybe Jordan Montgomery can get a couple more miles per hour off his fastball if, he doesn't have to go 5-6 innings. Maybe he can reinvent himself, but I don't know. That's a lot of money for an unproven closer. I think you and I both know that, what do they say? The hardest 3 outs to get are the last 3 outs.
Yeah, just ask Paul Sewald last year.
There's a lot of guys that you sit there, put him in the bullpen, and sometimes there's a mentality, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's, if you're asking me, would I want Jordan Montgomery and put him in the bullpen? No, not really, to be honest with you. That doesn't get me going. And again, the Cubs are not a team that traditionally likes to spend a lot of money on closers or bullpen pieces. They're kind of team that likes to kind of find guys on the fringes, turn them around. And it's worked for them sometimes. Last year it didn't. Hector Neris was a disaster free agent signing, and he got cut and picked up again by his old team, the Astros. But they've had success in the past, whether it was Andrew Chafin or Mark Leiter Jr. or other guys that they've kind of just picked up and made something out of. So I don't see them allocating that percentage of a payroll to a bullpen guy, especially a guy that's not, an elite closer. If they're going to spend that money on an elite closer, you might as well get Josh Hader, who pitched for Craig Counsell in Milwaukee.
Yeah, another name linked with the Diamondbacks, because our bullpen sometimes looks like some of the best in baseball. Sometimes it looks absolutely shocking. Who really knows? I think the next big talking point is, if you do make this trade happen, is the straight swap really that likely, or are the Cubs looking at getting some money involved there as well? Are they looking at some prospects? And then who do you think's getting sent over if that does go ahead?
I don't think the Cubs would want to send any prospects over. I mean, that Cody Bellinger and prospects, no, it'd have to be pretty much a straight swap. Like I said, $5 million isn't going to scuttle any kind of deal if there is one. But no, I don't see them giving any prospects to get Jordan Montgomery after the year that he had. I think you have much more likelihood of Cody Bellinger having a bounce back, better season. You read the projections and whatnot. If anything, the Cubs would expect something back and something hopefully better in return, which I don't know if the Diamondbacks would be that interested in. But no, I don't see the Cubs sending any of their top tier prospects. I don't even see them sending a mid-tier prospect to get Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah, and having seen Jordan Montgomery last year, I have to say, I would agree with you. That would be a fair deal.
It's tough to figure out. Like I feel like pitchers need spring training more than hitters.
Absolutely,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
I think that for those guys that waited, I know JD Martinez was in that list. All the guys that were in the Boris 4 or 5, however you want to call it. I think that it hurts pitchers to sit there and come to miss out on weeks of ramping up. You can do that at your house or at some clinic or something, but I just don't think it replicates when you talk about, spring training games and those type of things. I feel like the later you come to spring training, even if you are a hitter, but I think even more significantly when you're a pitcher, who knows? Maybe Jordan Montgomery does have a bounce back here. Obviously, you do want, I know the Diamondbacks do want to get rid of him, but you're not going to get a bag of balls for him. You know what I mean? No one's going to just take that salary straight up. You're going to have to try to exchange it for another bad salary, what looks like a bad salary. And like I said, the Cubs don't want to keep salary. They want to shed salary. So I that's why I just don't see it being a realistic possibility. But if it does happen, good on you. You're going to get a good player that, my main thing about Cody is just the amount of injuries. He's always a guy that, it's always something. And then, then he's out for a little bit, and some of it's not his fault. Get he was hit by a pitch last year, I know, in the hand, stuff like that. But it's just, that's been the situation since, he did that high five in the postseason where he dislocated his shoulder. He hasn't been this healthy. He reminds me very much of a guy we had in Chicago in Chris Bryant, where, he looked like he was surefire Hall of Famer. And the next thing you know, just injuries derail the career, and that can happen. Yeah.
And if he's coming to Arizona and expecting not to get injured in freak occurrences, it is not the place to come. We had some awful freak injuries with Ketel Marte at the point of getting MVP shouts last year, hitting a ball too hard and somehow hurting his ankle by doing it. We don't want to go there, but we are certainly looking to deal away Jordan Montgomery from the pitcher's retirement home, and sort of just we have to sit on it and wait and see.
It's one of those things that, if I'm a Diamondbacks fan, you hope that he bounces back. He does really good. And if you really want, trade him if the team's not contending and hopefully get something back. I think that's probably the best bet, but you never know. Baseball's a weird thing. Winter meetings coming up in about a week roughly. So it'll be interesting to see, but there's it's hard when you have a team, when everybody knows the hand that you're playing, right? All the other GMs know that the Cubs don't want Cody Bellinger. All the GMs know that the Diamondbacks don't want Jordan Montgomery. So why are they going to be sitting there jumping through hoops to get somebody that struggled so much? So unfortunately for the Cubs and the Diamondbacks, they're kind of in an enviable position right now. Yeah,
we're in a position where we have an absolute surplus of starting pitchers. We're expecting to get another year out of Zach Gallen, another year at Amara Kelly. We got Brandon Pfaadt, Ryan Nelson, all great young guys who are coming through as starters. We got Yumin Lin, who's a fantastic prospect, just won the Premier 12 with Taiwan, went hitless and scoreless in 4 innings against that Samurai Japan team, which is pretty incredible. Getting rid of Jordan Montgomery's got to be pretty high up on our list.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to wish you guys any luck because you guys knocked us out of the postseason in 2023. I think the Cubs had 6 losses in 7 games against Arizona in September of 2023. We went from a 90% chance of making the postseason to missing it by 1 game. So a lot of those pitchers that you mentioned, really, Merrill, Kelly, and some of those guys absolutely just destroyed the Cubs. And for whatever reason, the Cubs cannot play at Chase Field, where the Cubs are going to start their U.S. season. They're going to start playing the Dodgers in Japan, but then their first series in the United States is going to be at Chase Field in Arizona, where I'll be catching 2 out of the 4 games, the first 2 games.
Well, maybe I'll see you, but thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you on the next episode.